I'm Willie Vogt with the Farm Progress Virtual Experience, and I'm happy to say the Caterpillar is sponsoring today's session. I'm talking with Cale Doty from Ziegler Cat. And Cale, why don't you tell me a little about Ziegler Cat, how long you've been in business? Tell me a little bit about the operation.
Yeah, Ziegler Cat has been around 100 years in business. We're located at 28 locations across 4 states, Minnesota, Iowa, Wisconsin, Missouri. We do offer full line of ag equipment from AGCO, Kloss, Caterpillar, Brandt, and Geringhoff as well.
That's a pretty diverse line. But when it comes to farmers, what's the piece of equipment that you consider the most versatile on the farm from Caterpillar?
The most versatile piece, the most well-used piece is going to be the skid loader, a wheel skid loader, track skid loader, something of that nature. I get them in multiple sizes, from a little wheel skid to a large track skid, having the suspended undercarriage versatility when it comes to all the different attachments you can run on there. The suspension undercarriage is one of the highlights of the Cat skid steer that we do use. And then as far as product support from Ziegler Cat and the Cat dealer networks, having parts availability, having the service and the technology to go along with the machine to make the most efficient operation on the farm.
You offer a full range of sizes in skid steers, from pretty much the narrowest all the way up to some pretty hefty models, right?
Yes. Anything from down in 60 horsepower all the way up to 105 horsepower.
Well, plenty to choose from. Well, thank you,
Yeah.
Cale Doty, for your insight on what's going on at Caterpillar as well as with Ziegler Cat, and we thank you for sponsoring today's session.
Thank you.
I want to thank Cale Doty for his insight from Ziegler Cat. And we're talking now with Trevor Shanahan from Altorfer Cat. How long have you been with Altorfer, or how long has Altorfer been a cat dealer?
Willie, Altorfer has been a cat dealer for 60 years now. We service all facets of the construction, ag, forestry, mechanical, governmental, trucking, just about everything under the sun. We offer sales, rentals, parts, and service for all your construction equipment needs. Our dealership is growing. We're up to 33 different individual sites now with over 1,200 employees. We're proud to serve not only Southeast Iowa, Northeast Missouri, Central Illinois, but now we also handle the northern part of Illinois, including the metro Chicago area.
So why would a farmer consider Caterpillar when they're looking for the right machines and attachments? What are they looking for?
Sure. Well, all Cat machines are built Cat tough. And that includes our compact construction line as well. Skid steer loaders, compact track loaders, mini excavators, wheel loaders, telehandlers. Caterpillar and the Caterpillar dealers offer a large array of not only machines, but attachments to go with those machines. We have technicians that are certified, that are very well trained, and our parts departments offer all the parts that you need to get you up and get you going quickly.
Well, this is very interesting, and we're excited to hear about Altorfer, and we thank you for taking part with us in the Farm Progress Virtual Experience.
Yes, sir. And Altorfer and the Caterpillar dealers are very, very excited about sponsoring this breakout session in the 2020 Farm Progress Virtual Experience.
Hi, this is Willie Vogt. I'm with the Farm Progress Virtual Experience, and I'm here to introduce today Bert Rutherford with Beef Magazine. Bert's dealing with an interesting topic for the beef industry that he picked up at this summer's National Cattlemen's Beef Association meeting. Bert, I'm going to let you take it away and tell us more about pricing and price discovery in the beef market.
Thank you, Willie. Appreciate it. Howdy, everybody. Welcome to this virtual presentation on some issues in the cattle market, part of the combined Husker Harvest Days and Farm Progress shows. We're going to talk about a couple of things that are really top of mind in the business today. Start out looking at traceability, animal disease traceability, and then we'll jump into the deep end of the pool and take a look at price discovery and all the ramifications there. Next slide, please. Brandon Deppenbush, who's a cattle feeder and chairman of the board of U.S. Cattle Trace, nailed it, I think, with this quote: the unthinkable can happen, and we are living it. You know, indeed, COVID-19 has turned our entire world upside down, and we're all struggling to adapt, to change, and to figure out how we're going to go forward. Next slide. COVID-19 has really, like I said, just changed the whole world. It's affected the economy and the cattle business with a level of uncertainty that we just have never seen before. And that has affected really our outlook on what's going to come down the road. We do an annual State of the Industry survey and have produced a producer optimism index since 2006. As you can see, short-term optimism next 2 years for the cattle business is the lowest it has ever been since we've been tracking it. Long-term optimism down a little bit, but not quite as bad. Let's delve into this some and see what's going on. Next slide. Okay, here are, for short term, here are the results that beef readers gave to us. We did this survey just as the pandemic was really getting bad. So 63% of the readers who responded to our survey are less optimistic about the next 2 years. 26% haven't changed their minds much. And of course, you know, the beef business is a business of optimism. And 11% of our readers were more optimistic that, you know, we'd get through this. Next slide. Okay, that's a big change from last year, from 2019. Only 17% were less optimistic compared to 60-some percent. You know, 60-some percent last year were about the same, and 25% were more optimistic. So a significant change in psychology in the beef business. Next slide. So what factors? What going on in people's minds that are causing some concern? International trade, you know, that's becoming a more significant part of the cattle market. Some concern there. Market access. How are we going to go forward? Are sale barns going to be able to continue to operate? Industry consolidation and concentration. You know, this, of course, has been a concern really for as long as I've been in the business, and that's been a good while. Input costs, of course, are always a concern. So these are the things that are kind of weighing on people's minds. Next slide. Okay, for those who are more optimistic, those 11%, what are they looking at? Well, domestic demand. You know, it has been through this whole upheaval that we're living with. Domestic beef demand has really carried us through, I think. It has just been fantastic. And so those supply-demand fundamentals that are out there in the market are have got some people thinking pretty positively. And then international demand. You know, again, our export markets have been a growing and more significant part of our cattle market. Available feed and forage, this was before the drought, so I think that number might change if we were to ask that question today. Next slide. So looking at the long term, okay, compared to last year, what are our readers thinking, you know, 5 years out? About half thinking things are going to be about the same. And then pretty evenly split between those who are more optimistic and those who are less optimistic. Next slide. Again, a change from last year, not nearly as significant as short-term optimism, but still a change. Beef producers are a little less optimistic about the long-term, 5 years and out, for the beef industry. And I think that's something that to keep aware of, be aware of, and keep track of, because psychology in the marketplace is a huge factor, as we all know, and we need to be aware of what's going on in the market, and we need to be aware of our perceptions about that, because that's going to shape how we go forward in terms of fixing the things that we think we need to fix. Next slide. All right, looking again at our 2020 data, what are some of the factors about folks being less optimistic for the long term? industry consolidation and concentration. Like I said, that's just been an issue that has been there for a very, very long time, and it's going to continue to be there as we work through some of the macroeconomic forces that are affecting our market. International trade, great deal of uncertainty there as we're dealing with China and the potential that China has as a beef market, and whether or not we're able to access that. Government's always been a concern in the beef business, and market access and input costs. As we look at all the changes and upheaval that COVID-19 has brought us. So certainly some legitimate thoughts out there in terms of what could weigh on our market. Next slide. Okay, for those who are looking ahead to the next 5 years and out, thinking that we're going to get through this and we're going to be okay. Again, those same things, domestic demand, if we're able to maintain what we've got and build even on that, every dollar that works its way into the numbers on the check that you get for your cattle start with a consumer making a buying choice at the meat case. And so that domestic demand and our need to hang on to that and to grow it is just huge. So those supply demand fundamentals are just a major part of our market. And then international demand, again, if we can continue to grow that market, that bodes well, I think, for the business. Next slide. So we asked our readers, have you made any changes in your operation because of COVID-19? Split pretty much right down the middle between those who said yes and those who said no. Now, my speculation is that for those who said no, they were like me and they thought we'd be done with this by now. Clearly we're not, and we don't know when we might work our way out of it. So I think, again, if we were to ask this question today, I think those numbers would be a little bit different. As people look forward to weaning, to selling their calves, and how are we going to do that in a market that just is having a hard time finding its footing. Next slide. So how, for those who say that COVID-19 has affected them, how so? Well, the majority of it has been in their marketing and in their finances. Bankers, lending institutions, they don't deal with uncertainty any better than we do. And so they're going to want to know more information about you, how you're going to work your way through this, how you're going to market your cattle, just everything about your operation. And so the financial end of things, the lending end of things is an area of tremendous concern, I think. Next slide. Okay, let's take a look now really quickly at animal ID. So this year we asked, are you in favor of a national animal identification system? This lifelong, basically from farm to fork. Pretty good majority said yes. And interestingly, that did not change significantly from last year. And quite frankly, I expected that it would. So those thoughts and ideas are still pretty solid. Next slide. So asking those who are in favor, why? Well, obviously, the main reason that we're talking about traceability is for animal disease, and as Brandon Deffenbush said, the unthinkable can happen. And now that we know that it can, clearly we have a lot of concern about what would happen if the unthinkable were to occur in the beef business. But consumer transparency, we've Beef Magazine and Beef Daily, Amanda has spent a lot of time digging into what do consumers look for from you as a beef producer. And so that transparency is really important. Foreign markets, there's a lot of countries that require some sort of of traceability system adds value to my calves. You know, disease traceability, and we're going to get into this in a minute in terms of value added stuff, but being able to identify your calves can give you some marketing options other than just simply the commodity market. And then of course, theft, you know, that's always a concern. Next slide. All right, for those who don't think that it's such a good idea, why is that? Well, who's going to pay for it? You know, the last thing that you need as a cow-calf producer is something else to spend money on. And so that's a very legitimate concern. Lack of data confidentiality. You know, brands and bang tags are good enough. I don't think that's the case, but certainly some of our readers do. And then some of those other factors that go into it, all of which are legitimate factors. So that's kind of where the folks who don't think it's maybe such a good idea, that's what's kind of running through their minds. Next slide. All right, so who should pay for it? Well, readers are pretty evenly split. And I think the takeaway from this is that that cost needs to be spread across the entire marketing chain. You know, we shouldn't expect any one, at least in terms of private industry, to pick up the tab. You know, a lot of people are looking at the federal government to pay for those tags, and that's currently what's happening now. So as we go forward, as we go through this, this will be something that we're going to have to work out. Next slide. So what price is it? Excuse me. So what price is acceptable? Well, for those who don't think mandatory traceability is a good idea, no price is acceptable, and that makes sense. You know, most of our readers are thinking $1 to $2 a head is probably something that they can work with, and I think that's probably right, and I think that's achievable as well. Next slide. All right, so now let's get to the big issue, and that is price discovery. You know, as we have gone through market gyrations, last year at about this time with the fire at the Tyson beef plant in Finney County, Kansas, the market just works its way out of that, and then along comes the coronavirus. And that has a lot of people looking at the cattle market and saying, does it really work the way that it ought to work? And so let's dive into that a little bit and talk about it some. Next slide. Okay, one thing that I think is important for us to keep in mind as we work through this is that better price discovery, more robust price discovery, doesn't necessarily mean or guarantee better prices. Yet, price discovery is a very important part of particularly the fed cattle market, feeder cattle market as well. But I think for the focus here, we're going to be looking more at fed cattle prices. Next slide. So let's untangle a couple of things, do some definitions, okay? Price discovery, there are three factors really that we're looking at here. Price discovery, price determination, and then price transparency. Next slide. All right, what's price discovery? Well, it's the negotiation basically between buyers and sellers when you sit down and knock heads until they make a trade. And this happens more places than just the cash market for fed cattle, although clearly that's where our focus is in the cattle market. Next slide. Okay, more robust price discovery is important because these alternative marketing agreements that many feed yards are now using use that cash price for fed cattle as a starting point in the formula or the grid, whatever it is that they use to ultimately develop their price. And so having more robust price discovery is critical in the business, and we need that. And we'll get a little bit here into some geography, but basically there's some big geographical differences. Most of the cash fed cattle trade occurs in the Midwest. Virtually none occurs on the Southern Plains. And so that's been an issue and is an issue that we got to fix. Next slide. Okay, like I said, when we get there, it still isn't going to completely cure all the things that ail the beef business. Why is that? Let's take a look. Next slide. Price determination, okay? Price determination is simply a reflection of supply and demand, okay? To have achieved price discovery, you got to know where you're going to start with the negotiation. Next slide. Okay, well, where we start depends on who's got the leverage. Okay, if the seller, cattle feeder, has the leverage, that starting point is apt to be at a higher place and the price is apt to go up. All right, if it's the buyer's turn, the packer buyer, that starting point, that price point is going to be at probably a lower point and the price is apt to go down. And so that's an important part of the whole process. Next slide. So indeed, while price discovery and price determination are very closely related, they are two separate things in the cattle market. Next slide. All right, now there's price discovery, okay, or I'm sorry, price transparency. That's how visible those prices are in the marketplace. Next slide. Transparency is also an issue because prices for cattle and for beef are reported in many different ways. We've got live prices, dressed prices, then we get into the wholesale and the retail market, and we have prices that are reported there as well. So lots of different price points, lots of different ways in which prices are determined and set. Next slide. This is by no means a complete list of all the issues that we're dealing with in the market, but I think these are the three main issues that we have to deal with going forward. One, not enough packer capacity. Secondly, not enough price transparency, realizing that price discovery and price determination fit into all of that as well. Thin price discovery. As I mentioned, there are some geographical differences in the cash market for fed cattle and thus the price discovery and price determination for fed cattle. As we go forward, as we figure out a way to get more robust price discovery, that has to occur throughout the different geographic regions that fed cattle are marketed. Everybody's got to have some skin in that game. Next slide. Packer capacity. Until we get a little more chain out there, the imbalance that we're seeing in the fed cattle market will continue. Next slide. Until we figure out our price transparency issues, price discovery and price determination certainly will continue, but with less information than really would be optimal to make sure that things are clicking along really the way that they ought to. Next slide. All right, we got efforts underway on both fronts. Many of you, I'm sure most of you have heard about the True West beef plant that's being built in Jerome, Idaho. This is the first of others that are going to come on down the line. You know, a question has come up, why don't we just take some of those old plants out of mothballs? Well, there are several reasons why it's actually better to build new chain than it is to refurbish some of those old plants that have been sitting idle for a number of years. That really has a lot to do with technology. Some of those old plants were, built in the late 60s, early 70s, and the world has moved on. And so it's really probably more cost effective just simply to build a new up-to-date plant. And then for price transparency, somehow we have to move away solely from the cash market for fed cattle, and figure out a way that we can take the cutout, that we can take the wholesale price and the retail prices, and work them in somehow with the live and the dress prices. Work on that is underway as well. Now it's going to take a while probably for us to ultimately get there, but in my opinion and the opinion of some economists that I talk with, that's the direction that we really need to go. Next slide. All right, you know, we mentioned the cattle industry summer meeting here at the beginning. Price discovery as well as traceability were really the major issues that were discussed there. So NCBA came out of that with this policy where they're going to support a voluntary approach to price discovery, again trying to solve those regional issues, and do that in a way that's transparent, and really gets us where we want to go. Next slide. But the clock is ticking, okay, and it is winding down. The other key element in that policy was that we need to have something by the 1st of October, and that isn't very far away. And so stay tuned, because what we get reported from the outcome of that working group is going to really point us in the direction going forward. We need to know whether or not that's the direction that we ought to go. And so stay tuned to that. Next slide. All right. This is not good news, but it's real news. And that is the market is still doing what the market has always done. And that is to ration supply and demand. Uncertainty makes that a much more volatile process than otherwise. And we know that because sometimes like now, that can be pretty brutal. Next slide. So the signals that we're getting from the market are very real. We don't like them, but the market is sending those signals, and they are indeed real signals, I think. Next slide. Now, like I said, most of this discussion really has been looking at the cash market for fed cattle. Let's take a quick look at feeder cattle. And what we've seen, you know, as we've gone through late summer and into fall and getting ourselves ready to go for the fall run, feeder cattle prices really have stayed pretty good. And actually, we've seen a little bit of increase there. Are they good enough? You know, well, that's certainly for every individual cow-calf producer to answer for their own operation. But certainly we could use some upside there, I think. So what are you going to do? How should you prepare your operation, your cattle, to take full advantage of what the market has to offer out there? Well, this is a chart that Neville Spear, who does a weekly chart for us in the Cow-Calf Weekly email newsletter. This is looking at some of those value-added programs that are out there, and the potential that you've got to tack on a few dollars there up and above the cash price. And as you can see, there are a couple that are pretty significant. You know, so verified natural or the where food comes from program are two that just stand out. Now, that requires a change in management, might require a change in your management philosophy. But certainly these are at least taking a look at and seeing if some of these programs might be viable and fit within the management of your operation. Next slide. So to wrap this up, as we go forward, as we work our way out of the market gyrations and disruptions brought on by COVID-19, as we work our way forward into figuring out what our consumers want in a post-COVID world, I think this is the main question. Are we up to the task of listening and learning instead of fussing? Time will tell. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being a part. I appreciate your participation. Here's my contact information. Feel free to get a hold of me anytime.
Bert, are you still there?
I am here.
Good, good. Thank you very much. That was an excellent presentation. Looked at the pricing situation. We're pretty much almost out of time here. I guess the challenge ahead is to see what happens after October 1st with some of the triggers that are in place, and look at, I guess, for farmers to maybe look at those verified programs that can add value on the front end, right?
Well, you know, we've been pounding that drum for a good while now, and I think more and more people are doing that. I really do.
I think the other change in this before we log off is the fact that the consumer is more aware of this than ever before, that they have been paying attention to their food more than ever before. So any of those types of programs may have the potential for a boost.
Yes, I think so. You know, consumers really are becoming more brand conscious, I think, and that's been driven, in my mind, by certified Angus beef. But that's a good thing because it creates a brand consciousness amongst our beef eating consumers. And they've shown that they're willing to spend a little more money for the promise that a brand offers and for the product that meets what their particular individual wants and desires are.
Great. Well, Bert, thank you very much for your time today. I'm Willie Vogt with the Farm Progress Virtual Experience. For the viewers of this presentation, now that it's live, you can come back and view it again at any time and also share with your friends. We appreciate your visit here at the Farm Progress Virtual Experience. Have a great day.